yeah, just be informed that we are recording this webinar. Yeah, so you are also able to watch it after the session again or share it with any colleague and your broader network. Okay, I think we have reached a critical mass. So good afternoon and a warm welcome to everybody who is joining from our SIPET community for this very important webinar, tracking policy implementation in ASEAN's energy transition, launch of the Power Policy Tracker. Yes, so today we are officially online launching our newest SIPET edition, the Power Policy Tracker. And I'm really, really happy to see so many of you in this webinar joining us. Yeah, we are very curious also for you to share your feedback on the tracker. You are our community, so we hope that you also benefit from our newest edition. And we want to do this as interactive as possible. So please post your questions in the Q&A section of this chat. And so we can address them during the panel or just after the presentations. We will also share the presentation later, so there's no need for you to do any screenshots or so, but you can receive the slides. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Maximilian Heil from GIZ Thailand, and I'm the project coordinator of in the project Clean, Affordable and Secure Energy for Southeast Asia, or short CASE. And I have the honor to moderate the webinar today. Let me briefly introduce the agenda to you. So we will start with a very brief welcome and introduction to the webinar. Then we will officially launch the Power Policy Tracker and share what you can use it for and what it entails. And then we will move into a panel discussion where we will have some reactions from our panelists on the Power Policy Tracker, as well as where we will try to actually address your questions which you have shared. Yes, so let me move to slide 2. So maybe next slide. As I said, I speak on behalf of CASE. We are a regional project financed by the International Climate Initiative of the German government. We work across Indonesia, the Philippines, Thailand, and Vietnam to support an evidence-based, inclusive energy transition. And as CASE, we have a very specific and special setup because it's implemented by several organizations in a consortium. We have partners from Germany, NewClimate Institute, and Agora Energiewende. And we also cooperate with local think tanks from the region, such as ERI and TDRI in Thailand, ISR in Indonesia, and ICSC in the Philippines. You will see some of the representatives from these organizations also in the call today. Next slide. Let me briefly introduce to you CASE. CASE's aim is to support Southeast Asia's path to carbon neutrality while maintaining energy security and affordability. We do this by strengthening evidence, building narratives, and supporting strategic dialogue. And our work spans around 5 areas. The first one is research and evidence. We are engaging non-energy stakeholders, and we also provide tailored technical assistance. We also promote public discourse and transparency in mapping. And today we will focus on this last area, where where on transparency and mapping, where also CPET falls under. Next slide. So why did we create SIPET, the Southeast Asia Information Platform on the energy transition? In 2020, we interviewed stakeholders and experts across the region and found one major gap. There was no shared platform connecting energy data with people. And this actually led us to the creation of CPAT, with the long-term goal of handing it over to a regional host for sustained use in the future. So what is CPAT? Next slide. CPAT is an interactive open access platform designed to strengthen energy transition through transparency and regional coordination. It connects data, policy, and people across Southeast Asia. And why is that important? Next slide. The platform really helps users to understand transition challenges, identify entry points, and learn from each other. So CPAT's goal is not just to inform, but to empower decision makers and practitioners. When we look at the structure of the platform, next slide, we see that CPAT has 3 core features: a knowledge hub with up-to-date data insights, a project mapping tool showing who's doing what and where, and the power sector resources. And that consists of tools tracking the transition across the region. And the power sector resources is also something where we are focusing, where we're going to be focusing on today's webinar. So let me also briefly touch on our project mapping tool. So next slide. In our project mapping tool, you will find a database of energy projects from the region, specifically in Vietnam, Indonesia, the Philippines, and Thailand. It's a place where donor organizations can become members and upload their projects directly on the platform. Currently, we have around 481 clean energy projects, and that represents over 45 billion US dollar in investments across these 4 major Southeast Asian economies. So I think that's very interesting, and please check it out. Let me move to the next slide. So the power sector resources consists of 5 tools, which share data insights in the energy transition on, for example, energy generation, consumption, and emissions. And today, we are actually very excited because you counted correctly. There you only see 4 tools. We are very excited to launch the 5th tool, which you can see on the next slide. And this is our newest feature. It's the Power Policy Tracker, and it's a structured comparative overview of energy transition policies across all ASEAN member states. And you will find renewable targets, grid plans, as well as electric vehicle targets. And it's linked directly to national policies and regulations, enabling users to trace goals to legal frameworks. More about the tool later. Another very important part, which you should also check out, is our knowledge hub. Next slide. Where users can upload publications and access recent research. You can also sign up there for our newsletter to stay up to date on transition trends across Southeast Asia. Next slide, please. If you have your phone next to you, you can just get it out and scan the QR code below. It will direct you to our newest tool, the Power Policy Tracker. Please check it out now or after the webinar. Yeah, And while I introduce you to our next speaker, I would like to introduce you to Hannah Fekete. She works at NewClimate Institute in Germany, and she actually led the development of the Power Policy Tracker. She will provide a brief overview of the tool and what it can be used for. So Hannah, please go ahead in presenting the Power Policy Tracker in more detail. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Max. Next slide, please. I'm very happy to introduce to you today the Power Policy Tracker. It's a tool that we've developed as part of the CASE consortium over the past year. I will run you through the objectives and some key findings of this new tool now. Next slide, please. The Power Policy Tracker compares policies that support the energy transition across ASEAN countries, and we focus on the power sector here. The objectives that we pursue with this are different ones. First of all, we think that through checking the existence of policies in predefined areas, we can comprehensively identify policy gaps. And through that, we can create a conversation about which policies are required for this transition. So by pointing to the blind spots or gaps, we encourage this conversation. We also hope that countries through this tool can identify and replicate conducive market and regulatory frameworks. And also that by seeing what their neighbors are doing, we encourage some sort of race to the top. Next slide, please. The policy tracker has its origin in the overall CASE vision for the energy transition. And I will, in the next slides, provide you a bit of an insight on how we translate this vision into this tool. So we first describe the vision, we then translate it to a policy framework, and then we map the country's policies against it. Next slide, please. So the first step, describing this vision. This is something that the CASE project actually has done already at the start of the project a couple of years ago, where we defined the CASE archetype pathway, which is a vision for the power sector, for a transition in the power sector, taking us from the status quo today to a vision in the future in Southeast Asia. And we do this along 4 key elements that you can see here in the arrows. And the vision for each of them are as follows. For renewables, we expect a high share of wind and solar, which are the cheapest zero carbon sources. In terms of flexibility, we expect a combination of power plants, storage, and demands, which are operated together and flexibly as an integrated system. In terms of market design, we expect really effective signals to the market that keep then also the costs for consumers down and keep the whole system affordable. And lastly, for the grid structure, we expect a decentralized system with lots of distributed generation sources and a high share of electrification in the demand sectors. So this is the CASE vision. And in the next slide, I will now show you how we translate this into a policy framework. Next slide, please. This is, of course, a simplification, and you can go much more granular than this. Happy to discuss this further in the questions and answers section later. But this is what we've done for now to mirror this archetype pathway in different policy areas. For renewables, we selected renewable electricity generation targets as an indicator, and generation specifically as opposed to capacity targets, because it shows much more this integrative aspect of the target of actually getting the electricity into the grid. Then in terms of flexibility, we have a proxy, we take this proxy via the demand sectors through electric vehicle sales targets. And you might now say, well, electric vehicles will simply drive up electricity consumption. But actually how we see electric vehicles, we see them as a huge possible battery, a storage option, if it's integrated in a smart way. So in this way, electric vehicles can support flexibility of the system overall. The market design element is not covered in this power policy tracker, but I would like to remind you of a CASE publication that describes detailed insights on electricity market design in the 4 CASE countries. And I've linked that at the bottom of the slides. You can find that on our CASE website too. For the grid structure, what we look at here in the Power Policy Tracker is grid development plans, where we check whether the countries consider a higher share of renewable energy in their development plans. Next slide, please. Can you go back one slide? I think there was one slide missing. So the next step that we then take, sorry, I'm waiting for the slide to show up. What you should see on that slide, slide 19, is a overview of how we approach the different policy areas. So for each of them, we describe the policies. You can see a link to the actual policy documentation and a description of the policy. We then also tried to actually show, and that's what you can see on this slide, the target level of policies and try to make those comparable. For electric vehicles, this was quite challenging and really came with many challenges. For example, the targets are very differently defined. We try to harmonize it to shares of sales, but that was not always possible. Some countries express their targets as share of stock, others express it as share of production. So we see quite some big differences. What will also be very interesting to explore for electric vehicles in the next years is to what extent actually global markets will drive the developments on the grounds versus electric vehicle targets of the governments. But even if global markets drive the developments of electric vehicle uptake, policymakers will still have a role of actually integrating this high share of EVs. Referring back to what I mentioned earlier, that only if these electric vehicles are well integrated, they can really serve as a catalyst for flexibility in the system and not a challenge. If you could go back 2 slides, if that's possible, to the RE targets findings. Yes, thank you. So for our targets, first thing we see, and that's maybe obvious, but still good to mention again, that all countries do have RE targets. Singapore is not on this slide because the scope is so different that we actually didn't include a value for it, but they also have a RE target. For most of the countries, the targets vary between 20 and 40% by 2030. But there are some outliers and also some differences, particularly in the share of variable renewable energy within these targets. And next slide, lastly, the grid development plans. Here we also see a very clear direction that actually all countries that have a recent plan do integrate or do consider renewables in some way. What we also found, though, if you take a closer look at the documents, is that the depth and the speed really varies. Some countries link the grid planning very closely to their power development plans, up to specifying certain transmission lines, etc., where others simply mention somewhere that, of course, renewables are important and somehow the grids will have to support renewables in the future. So there's really quite a variety of depth in the grid development plans. Yes, this is my last slide. If you could go maybe to the thank you slide. Yes, please do contact us. Thank you so much for your attention. Do contact us, particularly if you have additional information on these policies. I should say that the CASE program, of course, has a focus on these 4 countries. We've covered all ASEAN countries here, but the level of detail we have available is much higher for the CASE country. So if you are from any of the other countries and would like to provide some information, we'd be really happy to receive it through this email address. And with that, thank you, and back over to Max.
Thank you, Hannah, for sharing also our vision and how it translates into the tracker and into implementation, and also for sharing some of the key findings from the Power Policy Tracker. Great. I think we can directly move into the panel discussion. Let me briefly introduce the panel, and I'm very happy that all of you are joining us today. I think actually all of you have also contributed to the development of the tracker and also reviewed the tracker. So I'm really, really glad that you are joining the discussion today. Let me introduce you all. First of all, I would like to introduce Agus Tampubolon. He works as project manager for CASE at the Institute of Essential Services Reform, or IESR, in Indonesia. Thank you so much for joining, Agus. Charles Diaz, who works as Senior Data Analyst at the Institute for Climate and Sustainable Cities in the Philippines. Thanks, Charles, for also joining. And my colleague Nguyen Nhiem Thi, who's based in Vietnam and who's working for GIZ Viet Nam. Thank you also to you for joining. And yeah, maybe we can start with some general reflections about the power policy tracker. And maybe first question to you, Agus. How do you see the power policy tracker being useful in your country's context?
Yeah, thank you, Max. Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. So, as Hannah mentioned in her presentation, she has explained the purpose of this power policy tracker and how this power policy tracker has been the output that translate the case vision into the policies, and we track them. For the context of Indonesia, I think this power policy tracker, for one, can be used as a go-to place to see the power sector policies, because usually if we see at the power policy tracker, it tracks the renewable target, EV, and then the grid development, right? And usually some of this information can be scattered. So by having them all together in one place, this can be used as a go-to place to see the policies in these aspects. Second, this is aligned with the purpose of the policy tracker as well. I think this power policy tracker can be used as a tool to compare the policies target among the countries, case member countries for this moment, and then when it's further developed in covering all the ASEAN member states, then it can also be used to track the policies there, and can be used as a reference to see how, in this context, Indonesia positioned among other countries in Southeast Asia. So can be function as a benchmark, so to say. And with the visualization as well, it can be used to show the users to be able to identify quick the trends that is happening, how one target in another country compared to the other country. Those are the three things that I can think of as of this moment, Max. Thank you.
Thank you, Agus. Yeah, I think you made some really good points in terms of creating an overview and also a benchmark for the region, so that countries can also see how their peers are, what kind of targets they have and what they are aiming for, and also compare the level of ambition maybe in terms of their targets. I think that's very interesting. Yeah, maybe let's move to you, Charles. So from your experience, what other types of information or tools do policymakers need to make well-informed decisions in the power sector? I mean, that's a very broad question, but since you work a lot with data, maybe you can share your perspective on this.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Max. So good afternoon, good morning, everyone. In the Philippines, we're a liberalized market, so that means decisions in the power sector are not made just by the policymakers, but the developers and investors in renewable energy can make business decisions as well. So, for example, a map-based platform with the geography, the presence of RE resources in certain localities, they can be tracked. We can find out how much potential is in a certain area, and these developers, these investors, they can choose which areas they would like to put their money towards. Another useful platform is what we have here in the Philippines, the Energy Virtual One-Stop Shop, or it's called EVOS. So it acts as a platform wherein it basically centralizes the approval process of power projects here in the country. So our policymakers, our Department of Energy, our ERC, it's more easier for them. For the approval, the process is more efficient in the approval of these power projects.
Thank you, Charles. Yeah, I think also very interesting to share the perspective from the Philippines, where you have a liberalized market. And I think you really stressed the fact that data is really important, not only for the policymakers, but also for the investors in terms of which site to choose to set up the RE generation plant. And very interesting example you also shared on the one-stop shop, which is the one place where people can go to get their approval for their projects. Perfect. Yeah, let's maybe move then to Nguyen and share some perspectives from Vietnam. Yeah, when you reviewed the data on the tracker, were there any trends or gaps that stood out to you or perhaps also surprised you when you looked at it?
Yeah, hello everyone, and thanks Max for this question. One thing that stood out to me when reviewing the data on the tour, so is that Vietnam and Indonesia currently have the similar to the installed power capacity. And by 2030, Vietnam set a kind of the target for the iron generation was around 28 to 36 percentage include the hydropower, and if we including the hydropower, it's around 51 to 57 percentage. And compared to the 21 for the percentage for the Indonesia, so that something interesting that is Indonesia ZP so have a higher committed finance package of the 20 billion USD, while Vietnam is 15.5 billion USD. So it's quite surprising to me when looking poorly at the number. Yeah, this makes me curious a lot, and I try to deep dive to understand more about the Indonesia context. Yeah.
Thank you, Nguyen. I think you made a very good point and a very good example also for what we can actually make use and use the tracker in terms of comparing directly the two JETP countries, Indonesia and Vietnam, and seeing that the RE target of Vietnam is higher, despite the fact that the international funding for the JETP, which is allocated to Indonesia, is actually higher, right? Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that impression. Maybe let's do one more round of questions and then look at the questions from the audience. And dear audience, please continue. I see you are already posting questions in the chat, but please continue doing that. So we can start addressing them just after this round. Let's maybe start this time with Nguyen, with you again. Maybe you can elaborate a little bit because we all know that the Vietnam Power Development Plan, PDP 8, was revised earlier this year. Maybe you can explain a little bit what are the key changes in terms of RE targets, and how do you expect that these will actually be implemented? And I think this will probably also have some effects on the grid planning. So maybe you can also touch on that aspect. Thank you.
Thank you, Mas. This is quite a big question to me. However, I will share from my point of view there. Firstly, talk about the revised PTPS. Some main trends in IE targets stand out. First of all, to talk about the capacity. So total the renewable energy installed capacity, including hydropower, increased from the 43 gigawatt to between 80 and 130 30 gigawatt by 2030. So roughly it's kind of the 2 or 3 times higher, right? And this increase is mainly driven by the solar and wind power. So regarding the generation, as mentioned before, the percentage of renewable energy generation targets, including hydropower, it's around 51 to 57%. And that is kind of the around 20% increase compared to the earlier PTPS version. So you see, Vietnam set a higher ambition for the I targets. So, from my point of view, to achieve these targets, I think we need kind of the 3 key pillars. Firstly, about the supply side, and secondly, about the kind of transmission line, and the last one about the policy. So talk about the supply side, we need to promote the flexible resources as well as the battery storage. And we also need to kind of improve the grid infrastructure. So expand transmission networks as well as enhance forecasting and across invest in smart grid system. So, but to ensure flexible supply side as well as the kind of the expand the grid. So strong policy and sufficient finance things are essential and very important to that. Yeah, that is all for my side.
Thank you so much for sharing your perspective, Noan, and well noted that the level of ambition has increased and that the grid planning needs to go hand in hand with the increase, especially of variable renewables such as solar and wind. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, maybe let's move then to Agus. And also in Indonesia, the RUPTL, which is, yeah, I guess your power development plan, right, introduced several updates. Maybe you can talk about what were the most significant changes, especially regarding renewables. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Max. But before I go there, the question that you asked previously to Charles is also interesting because for example, in Indonesia, with our partner Bapenas, there was a request from them for such a tools or platform, right? A platform or tools of modeling, or like a platform that the government can use as a central government talking with the regional government about the energy planning, power sector planning. So in my opinion, for a better improvement of SIPET in the future, I think we also need to think about how to integrate something that the user can easily tweak. For example, if the user want to set up constraint or put in the target, how will it will change the data setup that will be shown by the tools or the platform. It's a bit of a modeling perhaps, but that is something that is requested by our political partner in Indonesia. And also, as of right now, if we see the power policy tracker, probably it is something that is static. So it is the regulation, the policy that is released by the government in each country. I think we can also think about how if we track the progress, the implementation, and I think this will bring more benefit to the user in the end. Back to your questions, yes, Indonesia has released through the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources the RUPTL or PLN business plan. So basically, it is not similar with the power development PDP in Vietnam. What is similar with PDP in Vietnam would be our electricity national plan or national plan of electricity, which was released in 2024 last year, and it will be until 2060. So the hierarchy of policies in Indonesia, we have RUN or for the energy sector, and then we have RUKN, or the one that or the English translation is National Electricity Plan, which is in the same level. And then RUPTL is developed based on this National Electricity Plan, which means the target for the power sector development, renewables, and etc. will be derived from this higher level of policies. In the RUPTL that just launched a couple of weeks ago, and if we compare it to the previous RUPTL, which was released in 2021, so like 4 years ago, we see significantly an increase in the capacity of the power plant that will be put into the system. So previously it's around 40 point something gigawatt, and in the new target it will be around 70 gigawatts, so almost 30 gigawatts of an increase in the power sector of the power plant. We can understand this because with the new government, the government has set up economic growth of 8% by 2029. So we need a lot of electricity to support this growth. The next significant change that we can see is the new renewable energy target or capacity. Previously, it's around 20-something gigawatt. Now it's around 53 gigawatts. So it is almost more than doubled, actually, in terms of renewables capacity. With the increase in renewables capacity, the capacity of gas power plant is also reduced. And then I think in the new RUPTL, the government already looked at solar and wind as a potential source of energy that can be utilized to generate electricity in the future. So they are not, so to say, that concerned anymore with using more wind and solar, because in the new RUPTL, the capacity has been increased more than 5-fold, if I'm not mistaken. And then, of course, with this new RUPTL, to support the economic growth, the number of transmission, distribution, number of substations, plan for interconnection across islands, main islands in Indonesia has also been laid down. So those are, I think, some of the insights or snapshots of important information from the latest RUPTL next. I hope that's not too much.
No, thank you so much for giving us a brief overview of what the new RUPTL entails. And I think you made also a very good point in the beginning that, of course, the power policy tracker is like a snapshot of the momentum. It just shows what the current policies say, and it really depends how old the policy documents are, where they refer to, how ambitious the targets are. And that would be actually the next level, where you could actually model how policies would influence and project the development of RE in the country, so that policymakers can see what would be useful to implement. So you already made a good point on the limitations of the tool. Thanks for that. and how we could actually evolve the current version. Let me now move to Charles. And as you all know, the third part of the tool really looks into electric vehicles and the EV targets of the countries. And we know that the Philippines have launched a comprehensive EV roadmap. Maybe you can elaborate a little bit, what it entails beyond the EV fleet targets.
Yeah, so first off, I would like to stress two things. First, the transport emissions make up around 30% of the total Philippine greenhouse gas emissions. And of that, road transport makes up around 80% of those emissions. Second, most of our fuel is actually imported. So because of this, there's an energy security and economic burden on the public. So given these 2 points, this actually presents a significant opportunity for the Philippines when it comes to transitioning towards electric mobility in reducing its greenhouse gas emissions while also improving air quality and energy security and economic growth. Now, as you mentioned, Max, the comprehensive roadmap on the EV industry, it's not just the increase in EV fleet here in the country. It also focuses on its infrastructure, such as the charging stations, the manufacturing of these EVs, the research and development, and human resource development of the industry. So for example, the Department of Energy, they made the pronouncement that once the guidelines are in place, gasoline stations across the country would be obligated to put up at least one EV charging station. But beyond that, the adoption of EVs here in the country, to make it sustainable, it will require a robust local manufacturing industry. So this will make the availability of the vehicles, it will make it more accessible to the consumers. And lastly, I would just like to point out, and we really believe in this, we don't have to wait for the grid to be greenified before we transition towards electric vehicles. We can do it simultaneously because electric vehicles, they're more efficient compared to our internal combustion engine vehicles. So just transitioning to EVs, even if we're still not at our clean grid scenario or situation, we can still reap the benefits of reduced emissions and reduced energy consumption. Yep.
Thank you, Charles. And thanks also for referring to the amount of fuels which are imported and which cause a risk to the Philippines' energy security, and how EVs, if they're also produced locally, can actually support the Philippines in being more into their energy sovereignty. Let me now start with some questions from the chat. Please feel all invited to answer the questions. We have one specific question on Thailand. Unfortunately, we don't have anyone from Thailand on this panel, but Hannah, maybe you can answer this question. The question is, will your tracking highlight policy and changes in policy affecting distributed, for example, highly decentralized, lower than utility scale generation of electricity by individual companies, organizations, and consumers, including policies to make finance available for the associated investments?
Yeah, thank you, Max. And indeed, I think there have been a few more questions related to implementation. So maybe let me try cover this a bit more broadly. So we currently track the policies on the national level, but of course we see how action of all actors is pivotal. We still see that the national government, of course, they do have a responsibility in translating overall visions and development priorities, also climate targets into action, and make sure that trickles down into different sectors, different line ministries, but also the private sector, including the financial sector. So yes, it is all linked, of course. The tracker focuses on national level policies. I think one question that we are exploring is whether we would like to add supportive policies to the tracker, so that we don't only track targets, but that we also check, for example, is there, I don't know, a feed-in tariff to support this renewable energy target, or other financial incentives, or how are the challenges addressed? So this is something we are looking into as part of case, but at the moment we don't explicitly check it. We have other tools also on SIPET that track progress. So not only the targets, but actually checking on implementation. You can see the data browser where we check historical data and see how renewable shares, for example, increase over time. And we have the power transition progress tool where we check the progress of the power sector transition more broadly. So that doesn't focus on policies, but looks at many different indicators, about 70 indicators. So there you will also find indicators that are much more closely linked to actual implementation challenges, and including covering some of these actors, covering civil society, covering business and finance sector. So those are some other resources that I can point you to.
Thank you, Hannah. Maybe related to that, there were also questions on the NDCs, right? Whether we also count for the NDCs in the policy tracker. Maybe you can briefly also answer on that.
Yeah, happy to. We don't track the NDCs and net zero targets as part of this tool, but of course they are in the background in our case project. And whenever we work with the governments, for example, we are supporting some of the governments in modeling long-term pathways for the energy sector, and there these targets of course play a big role. But I'd be happy to also pass this on to some of the country representatives if they would like to add anything on this question.
Yeah, does anyone want to share a little bit on how you support maybe also the update of the NDCs which are due this year with your current work? If you are supporting that.
I just want to have some small addition. So GIZ Viet Nam currently is kind of with the SIPET project to support for update NDC 2025 in Vietnam. So beyond that, we also have some kind of the indicators to track the NDC implementation, something like that. And then I think there is clear potential for the stronger alignment in the future, for instance, by integrating indicators that reflect the NDC targets, update in, for example, updated information on policy implementation, how the RE projects are progressing, or whether grid expansion is on track, and emission impact, and of course, some indicators related to the carbon emission in energy sector. Yeah.
Thank you, Noang, for sharing some perspectives from Vietnam on how you're supporting the NDC 2025. Let me move. If nobody wants to add on this, then let me move to the next question. Maybe this is also for you, Noang, because I know you have done some work on this just previously. someone is asking whether we have done any projects or tools to assess the just elements in the process of energy transition in the region and the countries here in Southeast Asia.
Yes, currently in GIZ Viet Nam, we work with colleagues from the NCI to the conducting a study projection for labor force for the energy transition in Vietnam. So in this study, we will try to deep dive to the number of job creation from the renewable energy sector, as well as the number of jobs will be lost using when we fade down and fade out coal sector, and we will try to identify. So what leader skill we need to train or reskill to the labor force can meet the market research, market study, labor force market for the renewable energy, especially in hydrogen and onshore wind, offshore wind technology. And then we also try to find out also how many jobs are lost in coal fade down, and to based on that we can give some policy recommendation to can reskill training for them, or kind of have the compensation policy for them to ensure just energy transition.
Yeah, thank you, Noam, for sharing on your employment study. I want to do some advertisement here also, that please go on the GIZ website. The first version is already, or the part 1 is already published, so please have a look. And we are currently working on the part 2 of the report, and really looking forward to the second part by the end of this year. Yeah, maybe one more question from the audience. Why do the assumptions under the renewable energy targets include some countries, but not all the countries shown in the graph? Okay, that's a very specific data-related question. Maybe Charles, you would be the right one to address this. Yeah, please.
All right. Yeah, the way I see it, the assumptions, the countries in the assumptions section, I think those are the countries which needed some form of interpolation, some analysis of the target of that country. Other countries, for example, in the Philippines, it's clear, it's explicit that we have a 35% renewable energy share by 2030 target. So yeah, basically, if it needed some analysis, we have to show what kind of assumptions we did, what kind of assumptions we took, so that our data is a bit more, the veracity is there.
Yeah, thank you, Charles. Exactly. I think also Hannah pointed in her presentation to the point that sometimes these targets are very hard to compare, and that's also why we excluded Singapore from the overview of, although they actually have a IE target. Yeah, I think we have 5 more minutes, so maybe we can take one more question. Let me check. Somebody is asking like which policies are actually tracked in our tracker. They understand that currently we look into the renewable energy targets, as well as the grid plans or grid development policies, and the EV targets for 2- and 4-wheelers, and whether we are planning to include additional policies, for example, energy efficiency policies.
Yeah, thank you. I can answer this one. So energy efficiency is extremely relevant, particularly if we think about how much, how big these systems will have to become to meet increasing demand, and particularly in Southeast Asia, we see really strongly increasing systems, and with everything, all the energy that we save, we of course keep it more affordable, keep the power sector more affordable. The CASE project focuses on the power sector, so we explore some links to other sectors through electrification and so on, but the, for example, buildings or transport sector are not our core expertise. Hence, we haven't included energy efficiency here, but I would like to again stress that, of course, electricity savings are also essential and need to be covered too.
Yeah, the best energy is the energy which is not used, right? Or the cheapest. So of course we would like to also consider energy efficiency in our tracker. Yeah. Good. I think we touched on most of the questions. So a big thank you to our panelists for joining us this afternoon and for sharing your perspectives, especially from your country perspectives. And let me just also say, yeah, some words of appreciation, because I really want to thank all the partners and contributors who made SIPET possible. This is really a joint undertaking of all the organizations which you can see here above and also beyond. And I would really invite the SIPET community who is part of this webinar to help shaping SIPET and let the platform grow to become this long-term regional resource that empowers a fair, fast, and well-informed transition. And as you may know, we are currently looking and scouting for an organization which is interesting in running SIPET from mid of next year. So if this sounds interesting to you, please also get in touch with us. And yeah, we would be happy to talk. Yeah, and then I can just invite you one more time to visit our website, sign up for our newsletter, and provide us with some written feedback on the Power Policy Tracker. And thank you all for joining us this afternoon. Goodbye.